You wake up, check your bank account, and feel that familiar weight in your chest. Not enough. Not enough money, not enough security, not enough life. And without realizing it, you quietly label yourself, "I'm poor." But what if that label isn't just wrong? What if it's the very thing keeping you trapped? Because the Stoics would look at you, right now, in your current life, and say something uncomfortable. You may not be poor at all. You may just be measuring wealth the wrong way. The first truth most people avoid is this: money is not the primary measure of wealth. It's a tool, and like any tool, it only has value based on how it's used. The Stoics believed that true wealth begins with control over your own mind. If your peace depends on numbers going up or down in a bank account, then you are not rich. You are dependent. And dependency is a subtle form of poverty. Think about it. If a small financial setback can ruin your mood, your confidence, or your sense of self, then your emotional stability is being rented out to circumstances. And anything that controls your inner state owns you. There are people with millions who are constantly anxious, constantly comparing, constantly afraid of losing what they have. And there are people with far less who sleep peacefully, who move through life with confidence, who don't feel the need to prove anything. So, who is truly wealthy? The Stoics would say it's the one who needs less, because needing less means you are harder to disturb, harder to manipulate, and harder to break. The less your happiness depends on external things, the more power you actually have. Another hard truth is that many people who think they are poor are actually surrounded by invisible wealth. The ability to think clearly, to make decisions, to learn, to adapt. These are assets more valuable than money, yet most people overlook them. Your discipline, your patience, your ability to endure discomfort, these are forms of capital. And unlike money, they can't be taken from you by the economy, by other people, or by bad luck. The Stoics trained themselves to invest heavily in these internal assets because they understood something most people don't. External wealth can disappear overnight, but internal wealth compounds for life. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Sometimes what we call being poor is actually a result of unmanaged desires. The more you want, the more you feel like you lack. The more you compare your life to others, the more your own life feels insufficient. This is why someone can double their income and still feel broke, because the target keeps moving. New desires replace old ones. New expectations replace old realities. The Stoics warned about this trap constantly. They believed that if you don't learn how to control your desires, no amount of money will ever make you feel rich. There's also a deeper layer most people never consider. How much of your time do you actually own? Because time is the one currency that never comes back. If you are constantly exhausted, constantly stressed, constantly chasing, then even if you're earning money, you may be trading away your real wealth. The Stoics valued time above all else because it is the only resource that cannot be replenished. So if someone has modest income but owns their time, their peace, and their ability to think clearly, they may be living a richer life than someone making six figures but feeling trapped every day. And then there's the idea of resilience, the ability to handle hardship without collapsing. This is where Stoicism becomes almost radical. Instead of fearing difficulty, they trained themselves to become stronger than it. They practiced discomfort. They prepared mentally for loss. They built a mindset that could survive anything. Because once you reach a point where you know you can endure hard times, fear loses its grip on you. And when fear loses its grip, you stop making desperate decisions. You stop chasing things out of panic. You start moving with intention. That alone is a form of wealth most people never experience. Another truth that hits hard is this: society often teaches you to look rich instead of be rich. Expensive clothes, flashy cars, constant upgrades. These things create the image of wealth, but often at the cost of real freedom. The Stoics would look at modern lifestyles and ask a simple question. Are you owning these things, or are these things owning you? Because if maintaining a lifestyle requires constant stress, constant work without rest, constant pressure, then that lifestyle is not wealth, it's a polished form of pressure. And here's something most people don't want to hear. You can be financially limited and still be mentally abundant. But you cannot be mentally weak and truly be rich. Because a weak mindset will always find a way to turn abundance into anxiety. It will always chase more, fear loss, and compare endlessly. That's why Stoicism focuses so heavily on strengthening your thoughts, your perspective, and your emotional control. Because once your inner world becomes stable, your outer circumstances lose their power to define you. There's also the idea of gratitude, not the shallow kind, but the disciplined kind. The kind where you actively train your mind to recognize what you already have, instead of obsessing over what you don't. This isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about refusing to let your mind ignore what is already working in your life. The Stoics practiced this daily because they understood something powerful. When you learn to see what you have clearly, you stop feeling constantly deprived. And when you stop feeling deprived, you stop operating from desperation. And maybe the most overlooked truth of all is this. Real wealth is the ability to stand on your own, mentally and emotionally, to not crumble when things go wrong, to not lose yourself when life doesn't go your way, to not depend on approval, validation, or constant success just to feel okay. Because when you reach that level of stability, something shifts. You stop chasing life and you start directing it. And once you begin to see wealth in that way, something else becomes clear. Most people are not actually chasing money. They are chasing what they believe money will give them: security, respect, freedom, peace. But the Stoics would challenge that belief directly. They would say, if you cannot feel a sense of stability without money, then money will never be enough to give it to you. Because the problem was never the amount, it was the dependency. You can hand someone more income, more opportunity, more comfort. But if their mind is still restless, still fearful, still constantly comparing, they will find a way to feel poor again. There's also the quiet trap of waiting. Waiting until you have enough to feel good about your life. Waiting until things are perfect to relax. Waiting until some future version of yourself is more successful, more secure, more complete. The Stoics warned against this kind of thinking because it turns your entire life into a delay. You postpone peace, you postpone satisfaction, you postpone living. And the danger is that you can spend years climbing toward a version of wealth that never actually arrives because your standards keep shifting the moment you get close. And then there's comparison, the silent thief that convinces you you're behind, even when you're doing fine. In today's world, it's constant. You see other people's highlights, their wins, their lifestyle, and without even realizing it, you measure your life against theirs. And suddenly, what you have doesn't feel like enough anymore. The Stoics rejected this completely. They believed that once you start measuring your life against others, you lose control of your own standards. Your sense of worth becomes outsourced. And when that happens, you can feel poor in a room full of abundance simply because someone else appears to have more. Another truth that often gets ignored is how powerful your perception is. Two people can be in the exact same financial situation, yet one feels trapped while the other feels capable. One sees limitation, the other sees opportunity. The difference isn't the money, it's the interpretation. The Stoics trained themselves to look at situations without exaggeration, without emotional distortion. They asked, what is actually happening, not what am I telling myself is happening? Because once you remove the story of I'm stuck, I'm behind, or I'm failing, you begin to see options that were always there. There's also a deeper kind of wealth that comes from self-respect, knowing that you are doing your best with what you have, knowing that you are acting with discipline, with intention, with integrity. That kind of wealth doesn't show up on a bank statement, but it shows up in how you carry yourself, in how you handle pressure, in how you respond when things go wrong. The Stoics believed that a person who can respect themselves, regardless of their circumstances, is already ahead of most people who rely on external validation to feel worthy. And here's something that can shift everything if you really think about it. If your basic needs are met, if you can eat, think, move, and choose your next step, you are already operating with a level of freedom that many people throughout history never had. But because it's normal to you, it feels invisible. The Stoics practiced imagining the loss of these things, not to be negative, but to sharpen their awareness. Because when you realize how much you would lose if certain things disappeared, you begin to see that your current life is not as lacking as your mind makes it seem. Then there's the discipline of doing more with less, not as a punishment, but as a form of strength. The Stoics would intentionally simplify their lives at times, eat simpler food, wear simpler clothes, live with less comfort, not because they had to, but because they wanted to prove to themselves that they could, that they were not fragile, that they were not dependent on luxury to feel okay. And that kind of self-training builds a quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't panic when life becomes difficult, because it has already practiced being uncomfortable. And something else begins to change when you stop seeing yourself as poor. You stop thinking like someone who is lacking, and you start thinking like someone who is building. That shift matters more than most people realize. Because when your identity changes, your decisions change. You become more intentional with your time, more careful with your energy, more focused on what actually moves your life forward. You stop reacting to circumstances, and you start shaping them step by step. There's also a level of clarity that comes when you stop chasing the appearance of wealth. You start asking better questions. Not, how do I look successful? But, am I actually living well? Not, do I have more than others? But, am I becoming stronger, calmer, more capable? Because the Stoics didn't care about being seen as wealthy. They cared about being unshaken. And that kind of stability creates a life that doesn't need constant upgrades to feel valuable. And if you really sit with this, the idea of being poor starts to lose its grip, because you begin to see that what you are calling poverty may have been a mix of comparison, unmanaged desire, and misunderstood value. And once you strip those things away, what's left is something far more powerful. The realization that wealth is not something you wait for. It's something you develop, starting from how you think, how you act, and what you choose to value every single day. And when you step back and really look at everything, the definition of wealth starts to change in a way most people never allow themselves to see. It's no longer just about what sits in your bank account. It's about how steady your mind is when things go wrong, how disciplined you are when life gets uncomfortable, and how little control the outside world has over your inner peace. Because the truth is, money can improve your situation, but it cannot fix a restless mind. It cannot calm constant comparison, and it cannot give you a sense of enough if you've never trained yourself to feel it. That's why so many people gain more and still feel empty, because they built their idea of wealth on something that was never meant to carry that weight. The Stoics understood something powerful. Real wealth is the ability to stand firm no matter what changes around you. It's knowing that even if circumstances shift, you don't collapse with them. It's being able to lose and not lose yourself, to face uncertainty without panic, to move through life without constantly needing more just to feel okay. And once you reach that point, something incredible happens. You stop chasing life from a place of lack, and you start living it from a place of control. And from that place, ironically, you make better decisions, you build smarter. And yes, your external life often improves too. But now it's no longer the source of your worth, just a reflection of your growth. So before you ever say, I'm poor again, pause and ask yourself a different question. Am I truly lacking? Or have I just been measuring my life by the wrong standard this entire time? Because the moment you shift that standard, the game changes. You stop waiting to feel rich someday, and you start building a kind of wealth that no economy, no setback, and no other person can ever take from you. If this message hit you in a real way, don't just scroll past it. Sit with it. Let it challenge how you see your life right now. And if you're ready to start building that kind of unshakable mindset, make sure you subscribe to PSYCHOVEST, because this is where we break down the truths most people avoid, so you can take back control of your life, your thinking, and your future.